Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Powered by the Monroe County Reporters. Here are your hosts, Jason Harwood and Jacob Litton.
Welcome to another episode of Talking Grit. I am Jason Harwood. With me is Jacob Litton, getting ready for these Minnesota Vikings coming into town. They're at the bottom of our division. We're looking up at the Packers. We want the Panthers to come through, and then that way we could take the top of this division. This episode's going to look a little different than our previous preview episodes. We usually end on Grit Picks. We've decided to do a second podcast. So you're going to see two podcasts released today. That's where the Grit Picks are going to be. It's more of an it says NFL pod. We're talking about the NFC North, just talking about a little more NFL topics that still have a Lions tint to it. I think if you're a Lions fan, you'll get stuff from it, but we're trying to keep majority of the Lions stuff here and then NFL stuff so that we felt like we were rushing at the end, and we just didn't want to feel like that. We want to get through this whole preview podcast. So give us your feedback. Let us know how you feel on that. And we'll be glad to listen.
The real reason is that Jason's Grit Picks are not landing. They're just not doing very well. So he's trying to separate it to a different pod, hoping that less people, it's not out there as much. He doesn't have to, there's this whole thing where he's rushing his picks, and that's why they're doing so bad. And,
Yeah, that's it, Jacob. You've got me. People that I've never met in my life, email me, tell me I'm terrible at my picks is affecting my life. You're right.
Yep.
But you know what, Jacob? Big news happened today. Huge news. You actually broke it to me. That was the first thing, and then I went right to Twitter after that. Why don't you tell everyone what we're talking about? Everyone knows, but you tell us what's going on.
Yes, by now everyone knows, but Aiden Hutchinson agreed to a contract extension with the Detroit Lions. Finally, something that, early on at the beginning of the season before it started, there was very little doubt. And then once the season started, at least for me anyway, I didn't think we were going to get this news in the middle of the season. I kind of thought this was going to be put on the back burner probably. But you know what? Here we are. The extension came through. We don't have the exact final numbers and everything yet, but the preliminary from what we've seen looks to be on par with, what I expected anyway. We're not exactly breaking the bank and setting a new bar or anything like that. But I mean, what was your thought initially? I guess I didn't know that I was going to be the one that broke it to you, but I just happened to be able to text you right when I saw it.
Yeah, I was at the grocery store picking up groceries, and I looked down and I was like, Hutch signed his deal. Oh my God. And then you must have got early win, because even when I went to Twitter, it wasn't really out there. So Hutch
texted me personally. So then I just figured I'd let you know.
It. Yeah, that explains everything, man. I knew it. I'll have to talk to him the next time I talk to him about that and be like, Hutch, I thought we were friends. 4 years, $180 million. He's going to average $45 million per year, $141 million. So he's going to, we'll get into the numbers of the other edges, but a little less than, he's going to average less than Parsons, but he gets more guaranteed money. I'm going to be really interested to see how this thing breaks down, where the cap hits are. It's very similar to the Panay deal, where we're going to kind of roll in the 5th-year option. So right now, this is a 4-year extension. We've already got him for the 5th year, which was next year. So we have him signed through the 2030 season, which 2030, when you say that out loud, just seems so far from now, but it's really not. But it just, another decade, it just seems crazy that we're going to be at 2030. I'm going to turn 50 that year, Jacob. Oh my God. But, Hutch is 25 years old, 1 Pro Bowl, 0 All-Pro. I am super ecstatic that this happened. I wish it could have happened a little bit earlier so we could have, maybe shaved a few million off this. But I'm happy for Hutch. He deserves it. He is a premier player, top 4, top 5 edge player, which is a premium position. Outside of quarterback, this is the premium position in the NFL. We did not have to trade draft picks to get this player. We got him with, homegrown.
There you go.
Actually, literally, in the state that grew up in the state that, we play football. So this is a good day for Lions fans.
Absolutely. And I mean, you see that signed through 2030. He'll be older than Myles Garrett is right now, and he'll still be under contract with us. And anybody who had any sort of doubt, about him coming off the injury, as we've said from what we saw in training camp, he's not slowed down. He has not lost a step. And, now everybody's seen it so far. He's right back, same intensity as always. And he's earned it.
Yep, I agree. So you look at, just because I kind of mentioned earlier, Parsons signed a 4-year, $186 million. He's averaged at 46.5. Hutch is, at 45, so a little bit less than that. But Hutch has more guaranteed money. We have to, once Jacob and I get to see where the cap hits go, like where the bonus structure is, see if there's any void years at the end of this thing, we'll do another video just recapping the whole thing. We can't do that justice right now because number one, we don't have those numbers, and number two, we're trying to keep this podcast under an hour, and we could spend probably an hour talking about the impact of Hutch on this team, and also how this impacts the rest of the roster construction, because we have those big names that we got to sign next year: Branch, Laporta, Campbell, and Gibbs. So that'll be things that we'll talk about in that video.
It's a lot of important dominoes to fall, and this was the biggest one. So
huge. Are you happy with the number that we landed on with Hutch? Are you okay with it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is, like you already mentioned, if we had done this before the season, then maybe it could have looked more, because before this, Garrett got $40 million a year, Watt was $41 million. So maybe we would have been looking closer to 43, 44 per year, and then maybe roughly 135-ish guaranteed. In the grand scheme of things, cutting off just a few million does not seem like a lot. Time will tell, depending on if we don't have enough money for some of these other players. But this is right where I expected. I don't have a problem with any of these numbers.
No, I don't either. I mean, obviously we want to get him for the cheapest part of the deal, or cheapest that we can, but this is the way it's going to be, especially after the Myles Garrett deal. You knew it was not going to be anywhere south of $40 million. Then unfortunately the Packers had to go and do what they did and give Parsons all that money. However, if they didn't do it, the Cowboys were going to do it. Some other team was going to give him, Parsons the bag. They just raised the ceiling. It would have been nice for him to sign before the Watt deal. Crosby's averaging $35.5 million a year. It'd be nicer to be, south of $40 million, but after those contracts went up and Hutch has done what he's done this year. Now you could say, oh, the sack production isn't there yet. He's leading the league in pressures. When you see it, Hutch is having to run through a minimum of 2 people, sometimes 3 people per play. It'll be interesting how this thing changes with the Liam coming back, because I don't think teams are going to be able to give Hutch as much attention with the Liam in the middle. And if they do, they're going to be sorry, because the Liam's going to tear him up.
Yes, absolutely. I do want to ask you one question about this, though. Like, the timing of the deal is really strange. So, right, this is 6 days before the trade deadline. Do you think that's just a coincidence, or do you think that Brad Holmes is looking to add somebody to the roster here?
No, I just think that they, this is when was going to happen. I'm happy it happened now. I'm happy it did not extend into the off season, because now the Lions know what money they have. They know where the buckets are, and they can start planning ahead on these other guys. I'm sure they had like contingency plans depending on where this contract fell, but now they could start working on that Branch extension. They could start working on, if they're going to sign Laporta. I know they're signing Campbell. Campbell's going to happen. I'd be shocked if Jack Campbell's doesn't get extended. Maybe because he's got the 5th-year option, there's something to play with there, but I would be shocked. Branch for sure, they're not going to let him go into a free agency, or they're going to want to get him extended. So we'll see. The timing, I was not expecting it to happen today for sure. When I saw your text, you get a little bit of rumbling like a day or 2 before this, and I know we had some before this season, but all that turned out to be false.
Right.
But yeah, I'm happy that it happened.
They might have got me leaning towards that there might be a move on the way here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't expect any big moves, and I don't even know where I'd put anybody, to be honest with you. So is there a player or position that you're thinking?
I mean, there's some names floating around there. Obviously, you talk about the cornerback stuff. There's a lot of rumblings that Kayvon Thibodeau might be available for the Giants.
Yeah.
It's back to, that would be great to get like a top tier player like that. but I don't want to bring in a player like that and pay them and therefore not be able to pay one of the people that we have. But, that's a discussion we'll have later. But yeah, the timing of it's weird to me.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. Real quick here, put on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. If not, the Holmes extensions, 7 drafted players. He's given over $700 million in contracts. Can't be mad about it because these are all like cornerstone players. Penei Sewell, Ali McNeil, Amon-Ra, Derek Barnes, Aiden Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, and say what you say about JMO. I know he's not having the season that we want to have him so far, but I think that that's about to change the way the coaches are talking. They are not going to ignore JMO. We'll see, but $700 million in contract for drafted players. Other teams would be blessed to be able to, hand out that money to cornerstone players. We're not forced to. We get the opportunity to keep these players on our team.
Right. I mean, you just talked about it with the Packers having to trade away draft picks to try to get Micah Parsons. We don't have to do that. We get to keep our draft picks, and then you see what we do with them.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. And those players, you scouted them, you've coached them up. I mean, and the consistency in this coaching just tells you that the players are just going to continue to get better. It's a good situation in Detroit right now. All right, Jacob, get us ready here. Transactions that's happened since the last podcast we've had.
All right, so since the last time we talked to you guys, we did place linebacker Zach Cunningham on injured reserve. We also released cornerback Kendall Fuller from the practice squad, and we re-signed linebacker Ty Summers to the practice squad. The big news is that we did start the activation window for linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez. So, like we kind of talked about before, Zach Cunningham was playing really well, and we hoped that there was, some sort of discussion about who's going to get playing time. Well, now he's on IR, so now we kind of need Rodrigo back even more so than we wanted before. It sounds like he is projected to take almost the full 21 days. So in that case, that would make his return week 11 against the Eagles. Maybe, if he's moving further along than they thought, but Rodrigo's kind of been there with trainers. He's been in the building getting work and stuff in. Sounds like they probably have a pretty good idea of where he's at. So I expect week 11 against the Eagles is probably where we're going to see him. And then we also started the activation window for safety Daniel Thomas, who was really good for us on special teams. I don't have exact estimation for him, but it sounds like they're thinking he could be back even earlier than.
Yep. We'll see. We haven't brought anyone back from IR. We have 8 designations that we could bring that back. Ali McNeil did not count because he was on the physically unable to perform list because of the injury happened before training camp. So that didn't count towards our 8 people that we can bring back.
And neither would Rodrigo.
Yes, Rodrigo would not either. You're 100% correct on that. Daniel Thomas would, though, because he went on IR after the season. So we'll see. Happy to hear about Rodrigo. Just like him as a person. Great player, too. And, our linebackers have been playing really well. I know he's going to just fit right in. And he's also a very good special teams player, too. So it'd be nice to get him back.
For sure.
All right, Jacob. We're going to do the offensive main threats for the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, we're going to start with Justin Jefferson. PFF ranks him as the number 9 wide receiver in the game right now out of 126. He was NFL top 100, top 10 at number 9 also. Jordan Addison missed a lot of the beginning of the season. Is rated 42 out of 126. Him and JJ seem to connect a lot, so it'll be interesting to see how JJ is going to come back for this game. We'll see how that goes. We got to be careful of Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson, obviously our old tight end, comes in ranked at 31 of 75. I have him on my fantasy team. Statistically, he's not doing me very many favors. Since Kirk Cousins left, they don't use the tight end as much. At least.
Did you see he was really mad about the touchdown that got overturned?
Oh yes.
It's like you didn't catch it. Come on.
They're probably going to get their tackle back, one of their tackles back, maybe both of them. But Brian O'Neill is rated 20 of 77 at the tackle position. Aaron Jones has not played. He just not played enough to be ranked on PFF. However, he was the number 98th player in the NFL top 100. He came back off the IR last week, so it looks like he's going to play this week for the Vikings. Who do they have on defense that we need to be concerned about, Jacob?
All right. Defensive main threats. So some new names on this list from the last time that we played the Vikings here. So defensive lineman Jalen Redmond actually ranked Pro Football Focus number 15 out of 128. He's probably, I would say, the biggest surprise on here. They also have edge Jonathan Grenard is rated number 24 of 119. He was on the NFL Top 100 as the number 48 player. Cornerback Isaiah Rodgers, I'm sure you've all seen highlights of him, especially against Cincinnati, scoring some touchdowns for them. He's rated number 28 of 113 for cornerbacks. Safety Theo Jackson is rated number 28 out of 88. Linebacker Ivan Pace is rated number 74 of 80, which is really low rated, but that's somebody that obviously has been an impact player for the Vikings. Javon Hargrave, their big free agent get, rated number 98 out of 128 on Pro Football Focus. Not doing as well as they thought he was going to. Some of the other players, Andrew Van Ginkel was rated number 88 on the NFL Top 100. He's not rated on Pro Football Focus right now because he has not played enough. The other people that we're familiar with, safety Josh Metellus, linebacker Blake Cashman, also not very highly rated on Pro Football Focus right now. So, we were very concerned about the Vikings defense last year and, just Brian Flores and everything in general, but not having a great season thus far.
Yeah, they've faced a lot of injuries. We all heard like Carson Wentz, like basically playing with a broken shoulder socket is insane. So, we're gonna get JJ back, but I put Pace and Hargrave on this list not because necessarily they're main threats, but they're players that we know the name, but they're not having that great of a season, at least according to PFF.
Right. And honestly, if we're doing main threats on here and going off of PFF and who's having a good season, Redmond might be the only one. Jonathan Grenard is always, but I mean, they're just not having a great year. And that absolutely does not mean that they're not going to show out and have a great game against the Lions. We know how these divisional matchups go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Practice reports that come out. We'll start with the Vikings first. Fullback CJ Ham did not practice. A name that we're familiar with, Jeff Okudah, concussion, did not practice. It's probably unlikely he's going to play in this game, which is unfortunate because I was really hoping that he'd play in this game. I remember early in the training camp, everyone's like, Jeff Okudah looks awesome. All the Vikings fans thought that they had something. We as Lions fans knew what they had, and it's showing out because he does not rate it on PFF like he doesn't have his overall score is pretty poor. He doesn't have like a rating because he hasn't played enough snaps to be ranked at his position, but he'd be pretty much at the bottom if he did. Tight end Josh Oliver, who's this is kind of a big loss for them. He really helps out in their run game. He did not practice with a foot injury. I think they've already ruled him out. Jonathan Grenard, linebacker that we had talked about earlier, has been dealing with an injury. Limited practice. Brian O'Neill, limited practice. That's their tackle. Quarterback Isaiah Rodgers, limited practice with shoulder. Big names on this list are Christian Darrisaw, full practice today. They haven't had, they only had their tackle for 9 snaps the game before. I think he played a full game prior to that, but hadn't played much this season. Both their tackle positions have been in trouble, and it's part of the reason why Carson Wentz got as hurt as he did. JJ McCarthy, full practice, said after practice that his ankle feels really good. I think they gave him an extended break, but it's a good thing they would either be starting him or a rookie if JJ couldn't go. And then Andrew Van Ginkel got a full practice in, but I saw he had a full practice, but it's still very questionable whether he's going to play or not. So it's a neck injury that he's dealing with. So I'm not sure. We'll have to keep an eye on that as the week goes on.
Yeah, Van Ginkel has only played in 2 games this year. JJ obviously only played in 2 games. The tackles, Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill, they both played in 5 games. So these, their starters have been missing time. So they definitely need these guys healthy. And that's just part of, do you rush them back because it's a divisional game, or would you rather hold them out and keep them healthy and try to make a run later on?
Yeah, they're at 3-4. They're kind of running out of time. So if they want to do something, they got to win, especially with this, like you said, divisional game. Quick review of their players on IR right now. Their starting centers on IR, 2 concussions this year. Ryan Kelly, Matt Nelson, another offensive lineman, former Lion. That's why I mentioned him here. Might be familiar with that name. Played 3 seasons with the Lions. And then Carson Wentz just went on IR with a shoulder injury. Ty Chandler, the running back, and then Rondell Moore has been lost for the season. All right, Jacob, how'd the Lions practice report look today?
All right, Lions practice report. You're going to start with the good news or the bad news? The encouraging news? I don't know. How do we want to do this? So
Yeah.
we'll start with the good one. So Terrion Arnold, full practice with his shoulder injury. He got into full practice. Vaki also got into limited practice. We already mentioned Rodrigo and Daniel Thomas. They were both limited. Their activation window is going right now. Al-Qadim Muhammad, dealing with a hamstring injury. He's got a limited practice in. Avante Maddox, who was out before, got in limited practice. Taylor Decker, stop me if you've heard this before. First practice of the week would be a limited practice, which these are all estimations, but this is how they're going here.
Yep.
And then the 2 players that did not practice, safety Kirby Joseph, still battling the knee problem, and then running back Craig Reynolds with a hamstring injury.
Yeah. Craig was a surprise on there. Must have happened in the last game, but we'll see a lot of hamstring injuries this season so far.
He was playing Dance Dance Revolution during the bye week, and he just went too hard.
He got himself in trouble. Oh man! All right, let's look at the team's ratings so far for this for Minnesota and Detroit. Right now, Minnesota's offense ranks 18th in points scored per game, whereas the Lions are currently at number 3. We're scoring 30.7. They're scoring 22.1. It's almost the spread right there, right? 8.5.
Yeah,
pretty close to the spread for this game. The Minnesota Vikings give up more points than we do at 23.1 to 21.6. We are the 11th. We give up. We're 11th ranked in points scored against, which is good. With our offense, that means a lot of times people are trying to play catch up at the end, so we'll give up some garbage time touchdowns, which kind of skews that stat a little bit.
good point.
All right, Jacob, how do we look offensively compared to the Vikings here?
Oh, we look better, right? Offense for the Vikings has really struggled so far.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of total yards per game, the Lions right now are at 357.3 yards per game, which is 8th in the NFL. And then you switch over to the Vikings, 296.6 yards, which is all the way down. They're 26th in the NFL. So talking about top 10 versus bottom 10 here, in terms of offense. When you switch over to rushing yards per game, the Lions 133.7 rushing yards per game. The Vikings have 93.9 rushing yards per game. So that is also ranked 26th. Our rushing yards are ranked number 7. And then passing yards, though, the Lions 223.6, the Vikings 202.7, which puts the Vikings at 20th in the league, the Lions at 12th in the league. Obviously, our rushing attack is lethal, and it looks like the Vikings' rushing attack has just not been able to get going so far this year.
Kind of plays right into what the Lions like, make you one-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we don't have to commit a lot to stopping the run game, that just makes everything else that much more dangerous in the back end of our defense. As far as defensively, Lions are currently ranked in 8th in total yards per game, 300, where Minnesota comes in at 14th. Rushing yards per game, this is huge too. We are 4th ranked team in rushing yards per game, only giving up 87.7, while the Vikings is huge difference, 24th ranked. So it's skewed both offensively and defensively, and playing right into the Lions' hands, in my opinion. Passing yards. Right now, the Vikings rank 8th, which I was kind of surprised about, but maybe it's because teams are just rushing on them and they don't have to pass as much. So that's what I'm banking on, because their cornerback situation's not that great over there, and with the injuries that they've been dealing with. Whereas the Lions passing yards per, we are 16th ranked at 212, which frankly, with the injuries that we have, I'm really happy with where we're at, passing yards wise.
Right, definitely.
All right, Jacob. It's time to us to move over to our interview. We've got Arif Hasan, who was with us twice last year. This is a really good interview. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. We'll see you on the flip side. All right, Lions fans, back at Talking Grit. We are in for a treat. We have Arif Hasan back with us. He was with us a couple times last year. I didn't get him on the draft talk. We got to do that next year. We're gonna do that. He's still writing for Wide Left. Focuses a lot on the Vikings, but writes for the NFL in general. Arif, thank you for spending your time here and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I had a lot of fun the last couple of times I was on here.
Good. It was probably more me than Jacob. Yeah, probably not. You're right, Jacob. I'm the downer of the group. All right, Jacob. I've been talking to Arif a lot. I'm gonna let you ask him the first question. Put him on the spot here.
All right, Arif. Through 7 games last year, the Vikings were 5-2, and right now they stand at 3-4. Do you think are Vikings fans panicking right now, or do they still think that this team's going to figure it out and make a playoff run?
I think if you just look at like the record, like the win-loss, they're not that far apart from 5-2. 3-4. Obviously, being on one side of 500 feels different than the other, and so you could make the argument that you can't choose where your losses are, but if they happen earlier, it feels worse until it feels better. But the vibe is way different. Like I've covered good teams that have at some point a losing record early in the season, which maybe early in the season's a bit generous. We're in the middle of the season, but like have had losing records at some point. But you're like you know that the team is good and you kind of trust, and so like the feeling is more frustration at like maybe losing some close games, or maybe there's like this injury that they're waiting to, and that's not the vibe right now. The vibe is disintegration, right? Like the vibe is that the Vikings have fallen apart. That they had a lot of opportunities last year. They didn't capitalize on what opportunities they had this year, and the season is just kind of broken a little bit. So you take a look at kind of the odds various analytics firms or whatever put together, and the Vikings have anywhere between 2 and like an 11% chance to make the playoffs, where they are right now and who their upcoming opponents are. And I think to a lot of people, 11% feels high. Like I think that's where the Vikings fan base is. The season just feels kind of kaput. And one thing about the Vikings, and especially the Kevin O'Connell Vikings, is that they do a really good job of like telling you that you shouldn't believe in them, and that at some point creating belief, like kind of despite your best effort. So it wouldn't shock me if at some point they go on this run and you're like, oh my God, this team really has something. And then they like punch you in the gut again, as is like tradition. But right now the vibes are bad.
A win against the Lions, I'm sure, would change that around.
100%.
God, talk about vibes for me. They would go in the toilet had that happen. Yeah. But all right, so talking about bad vibes, I'm gonna mention a name that's probably maybe make you sick to your stomach. Sam Darnold. He's leading, Seattle Seahawks, top 5 offense over there. Obviously, the Vikings offense has been struggling. JJ's been hurt. You got offensive line hurt. What is the perception of it? Are they thinking we should have kept Sam Darnold? Are we blaming it on the injuries, the offenses, struggles? What's your feeling and what's the fan base's feeling?
Yeah. So my personal feeling is like I know that like a lot of times, someone goes somewhere else and does really well and you're like, I'm really happy for him, but like really you're like seething. Genuinely, I'm like super happy for him. That rules. I can't imagine something cooler than that kind of like the back half of the journey he's been on so far in the NFL, and to kind of like have it validated that he's not like a Kevin O'Connell system quarterback. He's like producing, and he's doing it by maximizing his like playmakers. Like Jackson Smith-Njigba leads the league in receiving by 100 yards and has 1 fewer game than like the 4 receivers below. Like that's so cool, and he's playing like real, and it's really exciting football too. Like throwing it deep, hitting these bombs. It's fantastic. So I genuinely am happy. And I think one of the reasons it's easier to kind of feel that is because I don't think the Vikings really had a chance at signing him, this offseason. Like I think he wanted an unambiguous place where he was definitely the starter. There weren't going to be any questions, and he was going to get a reasonably high amount guaranteed and a great like sticker package number, right? Like the number on the front is high. Right. And that's what the contract was for him. And the Vikings didn't have the ability to offer long guarantees. They didn't have the ability to offer a large contract. And they certainly couldn't offer him an unmitigated starting job. Right. With JJ McCarthy, the idea was that he would be ready this season with or without that injury to kind of take on that starting role. So at minimum, there would be some kind of competition. Right. And so I think it was kind of nearly impossible, not actually impossible. You spend enough money, anything can happen. But I think it was nearly impossible for the Vikings to retain Sam Darnold. So I'm not that upset about it, but like optically, it looks awful, right? And so a lot of fans, and I don't really blame them, right? Like, because at the end of the day, you want results and you had access to those results and it didn't happen. And while it is kind of tough to imagine an NFL decision maker being like, well, we got this first round quarterback with like a clear path to starting that we love, that we've been talking about all offseason as somebody who's put in the work, put in the effort, and somebody that we're really high on. It's really difficult for that decision maker to kind of let go of that and re-sign the guy that you only had a bridge contract for. But I understand like when an NFL fan is like, I don't care about that. You could like just tell Sam Darnold he's the starter and then make it happen. And then if he sucks halfway through the season, then figure that part out later. Right. And I very much empathize with that, but that's not really how NFL front offices or players looking for contracts work. So I get it, but like I think that there is not resentment, like seeing, you know, someone else have fun without you. There's always kind of like a little bit of jealousy. And I think there's like less that and more resentment at what could have been. Right. And it's pretty, you know, isolated at anger, specifically at Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who has had his other faults as a GM, and less at Kevin O'Connell, although there's like a little bit of that too. You know, it's Twitter, but so you can always but I had a couple of people in my mentions be like, well, you got to fire this guy. And it's like, well, that's a little extreme, but that is a minority of the fan base that's giving me feedback. So I think that's the feeling, is that like logistically it's tough and you can recognize that, but as a fan, it's not your obligation to 100% be, you know, logical and rational every single time and put yourself in the shoes of the GM. You want wins and you had access to them and you don't get them. And so I get it.
My other thought is, Arif, Sam didn't end the tenure with the Vikings. The last two games were not good at all. I mean, probably his two worst games that he played at the season. I mean, I don't follow them game by game, but it just seemed like they were really rough games. So I bet the fan base at that point was looking to just get rid of him. I mean, they got JJ, like you said, you know, just sitting there. So I mean, who would have fault them for moving on from Sam Darnold after what he looked like? So what he's doing now is unexpected, at least in my the way I look at it.
I think that's a really fair point. And I think that when you look at the way the fan base was talking about him, you know, in February when there were rumors at the combine about who they may or may not sign, or in March, right, when the actual, you know, process is occurring, that was the dominant part of the conversation. And yeah, those were his two worst games of the year. There's only maybe like one other game during the season that could compete, and it was a win, right? It was a win against the Jaguars. And so like, how upset are you about how poorly he played, even if he only scored 12 points or whatever it was in that game? So, and that was a conversation, right? It's like, oh my God, he collapsed under pressure. You know, the lights were too big for him. He saw those ghosts he was so afraid of in New York. And that was a big part of the conversation. It didn't even enter into the language that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah at the combine used at the press conference. Now, he was a lot kinder and nicer about it. But he's like, hey, you have to take into account everything. And, you know, one of the things that and he listed a couple of things, but one of the things that he mentioned is like, you have to kind of understand if the quarterback that you have, you know, is performing, you know, in every circumstance. Like, he's being like very kind of, he doesn't want to throw Sam under the bus, but at the same time, he wants to communicate like these results do matter in terms of our evaluation. Because I think if the Vikings had won, you know, a playoff game, maybe two, right? I think they would say, screw it. We have a rookie. I don't care. This guy's the real deal. I think that they would have, and I think not having those two games where they lost the chance at the division lead in a bye, or they actually lost the playoff game, I think that those played a pretty significant role in them being like, well, you can't get rid of the rookie. You can't put him on the sideline or whatever. And so I think that was kind of the feeling of the fan base. But again, like, there's no contract that they signed where they have to be consistent. And it's really difficult to figure out, like, there's someone who's yelling at you now about the Darnold contract. I'm not going to go through their social media to see what they were saying in February, right? So you don't know if it's the same people, but it feels like the tenor of the fan base was, well, we got to move on, thank him for his like service, and then move on. And now it's like, we shouldn't have moved on. What are you talking about? That's crazy. And so, you know, that's just kind of how it is. But I think that the role of a GM is to kind of smooth out those like game to game, week to week reactions and to make the best decision long term. And it sounds like, you know, the Vikings didn't do that.
Yeah. I also question whether Sam Darnold would have, you know, with your offensive line injuries, if he would be the same quarterback that he's being in Seattle. That's, if I was writing for the Vikings or if I was, you know, podcasting for the Vikings, that would be my thought. With like, these aren't apples to apples. I mean, what JJ and, you know, Carson Wentz, they're running around like crazy back there. So that'd be my thought. All right, Jacob.
All right. Well, you kind of mentioned already, so let's go to this one. So in May of this year, the Vikings actually extended the GM's contract, right? So I know you've been talking about him, but overall, I mean, how would you rate the job that he's done? Do you agree with how he's went about building the team? I mean, Minnesota had 2 draft picks in the top 4 rounds because of those trades that they made, for JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner. So they did not have a whole lot to work with in terms of the draft, and then obviously a lot of movement in free agency. So I mean, just overall, how do you think he's been doing? How would you rate the job he's done?
I'd say like a C plus. I'm a tough grader. Like, I did like a little bit of stuff as a teacher, and the averages I was giving out were pretty low compared to my peers. So keep that in mind as C plus. And to me, that's like a little bit above average. Right? There are 32 teams. He's probably around 14 or something like that, right? But it's very strange evaluating him, because so far, to the best ability, the best degree that we have to evaluate his drafting, it's been pretty bad. Like, Jordan Addison aside, it's been pretty bad. I mean, he's not been very good at acquiring talent in the draft. And that's really important for GM. Like, there's no question about that. But at the same time, he might be the best GM in free agency, top 3, top 5, something like that. They keep on acquiring like Andrew Van Ginkels and Jonathan Bernards. And even though I think Javon Hargrave is kind of busting a little bit for them, Jonathan Allen is playing well. These crazy kind of flyers like Isaiah Rodgers, who's been up and down since that crazy Bengals game, but it's still, an incredible performance there. And he's been playing all right on the year. Finding like a guy from the UFL, Jalen Redmond, who right now is playing, Dan Campbell gave him a shout out too, who's playing just out of his mind, excellent football. Like, these kinds of roster acquisitions happen so frequently for the Vikings, where you're just like, they really do have some talent in the pro scouting department, and the GM does a very good job at acquiring these guys. And I know that like Lions fans think that they won the TJ Hawkinson trade, and maybe they did, but no Vikings fans upset about it, right? So that trade, among some other trades that they've made for players, have generally worked out. And so even though like, this offseason's been a little bit more trouble, getting Hargrave and not getting much out of it, letting Cam Bynum walk and seeing, especially early in the season, how he did for the Colts, trading away Harrison Phillips and then seeing what happened to the run defense. Even though that, hasn't worked out, I think for the most part, the way that he navigates veteran contracts has been really outstanding. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, you're looking at how competitive is this team from year to year, right? And if it's not competitive, is there like a reason that is outside the general manager's control? And the Vikings have been a very competitive team with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as the general manager. I think that he's doing it in a way that's kind of unsustainable, and that you probably need to be a little bit better at drafting for that to be consistent. So I'll knock him down a little bit. And then obviously this year, a lot of problems have emerged. And I think that they were problems that you could predict. Like, a lot of people think about injury as like these freak accidents, but like, you bring in like Will Fries and Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, guys who have either are directly coming off of an injury or have an injury history that's long enough, or they're just older, right? They're just more likely to get hurt because of their age, right? Harrison Smith is a good example. They brought him back, which, like, of course you would do it, but like, now your roster is full of these guys that feel like they might be injury prone, right? Well, they got some injuries from a lot of those guys, right? Or somebody like a Harrison Smith is on a pitch count, right? He averaged like something like 17 snaps a game for the first, 4 or 5 games of the year. Now he's a full-time player, but like, you didn't get that, and the roster fell apart a little bit. The defense fell apart. And so like, you'll get some injuries that you probably couldn't have predicted, like the Blake Cashman stuff. But it's like Ryan Kelly gets a second concussion of the year, and I don't know if you can be concussion prone, but I know that that's been an issue for him in the past. And so seeing it happen again, makes you wonder, like, did you do your due diligence on that, right? And Will Fries isn't playing up to the level that we thought he would, in part probably because he just isn't back to the form that he had before he got injured, right? And so the roster problems this year are probably, in part a product of some of the decisions that they chose to make about what they were going to take risks on and what they weren't going to take risks on. So I think that knocks them down from like the the evaluation from before the season, which was probably like a BB minus, to now like a C plus. So it's hard to find good GMs. And so I think there's a lot of GMs kind of hanging out in that C area. And I think Kwesi is better than most fans think he is. But like, his weaknesses are pretty glaring, but his strengths are pretty rare.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the sustainability. If a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract, you're not going to be able to just go out in free agency every year.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to pay a quarterback. I guess you could redraft and get another rookie quarterback and go on that run, but that doesn't seem sustainable either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you should probably nail that as soon as you can.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of mentioned it. We've mentioned it. There's been some injuries, and you're missing a lot on this defense that from the last time the Lions have seen them, Cam Bynum's gone. You've already mentioned that. Stephen Gilmore. You've had some injuries. Van Ginkel's been hurt. So who are some players that Lions fans should be familiar with that are stepping up on this defense? And you mentioned Hargrave as kind of a bust. I'm kind of curious about your opinion on him too. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell Lions fans who we need to be aware of on this defense?
So this is a guy, you may not have heard of him, Jeff Okudah. He's not even playing well. I just thought that'd be funny.
Back to that injury-prone thing you were talking about last time.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, I think that Jalen Redmond is kind of the premier kind of like under the radar. Oh my God, who is this guy? He's playing like out of his mind. And, it has gotten some run. I've seen a little bit in Detroit media where they talked about him a little bit, which I think is really cool. So he's probably the guy. One of the guys that's probably extremely important to the defense that last year, I don't think got a lot of press. I don't know, how connected Lions fans are to his name, but like Blake Cashman is genuinely, I think, one of the best linebackers in the NFL. And the difference between how the Vikings play on defense with him and without him is stunning to me. And some of that is a product of the way that the other players play and how he accommodates that play style. And some of that is just like genuinely like how good he is in coverage, how good he is at like reading his keys, how good is he at getting into the backfield and stuff like that. And the reason that he stands out to me is because the Vikings, until like these last two games, have been playing Ivan Pace as a starting linebacker, who I think a lot of fans have become familiar with. He's this like always blitzing, always downhill, undersized, this guy from Cincinnati, but he just kind of does whatever he wants. And, sometimes that works. And what Blake Cashman and like Harrison Smith and Josh Metellus also have been very good at is seeing what he's about to do, figuring out how that's going to cause some problems if it doesn't work out, and solving those problems before they happen, all within the span of like a second, right? Really difficult skill to have. And Eric Wilson, who is the backup linebacker who's playing when Blake Cashman was out, is actually a pretty good linebacker. He wasn't that good of a linebacker when he was starting for the Vikings 4 or 5 years ago, and he's improved pretty substantially since then. But he plays really standard football, right? And so if someone is freelancing, he's going to keep doing what his assignment is, which is usually what you ask of a guy. Mm-hmm. But now it's a liability to do it. And so that creates a lot of problems. And Blake Cashman is so in tune with what the defense needs to do as a whole that he can kind of solve these problems. And I think that that's a really valuable skill. And that's why I would say that even though not a ton of people have talked about him or know about him, that he's maybe one of the better linebackers in the NFL. So I would go with that. Josh Metellus was that guy last year. I think a lot of people have heard of him now. But he was playing high safety while Harrison Smith was on this pitch count. Now he gets to play back in the box where he's a lot more comfortable. And so that was a problem for the Vikings defense when Harrison Smith was not on the field. Other than that, I think people have become familiar with Isaiah Rodgers from his week 3 performance. Byron Murphy already made a Pro Bowl, so I don't need to talk about him. Grenard and Van Ginkel, I think, both made a Pro Bowl, and then Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave have like their own like long reputations that they bring with them. Javon Hargrave, I'm arguing, is a bust, even though I believe he's started every game. He's actually been reduced in his snap count for Jalen Redmond, actually, over the past 3 games. He's been effectively benched without losing any starts. So his snap count has gone from 40 to 50 snaps per game, which is a ton for a defensive tackle, down to anywhere between 20 and 30 snaps a game, sometimes 35, depending on how long the game is. And that is a significant benching. Redmond is taking more snaps than him. And so he's effectively the starter. And so he's pretty good at producing pressure. He's got a high pass rush win rate. He's among the leaders in the NFL right now at pressure rate, but he's such a liability against the run. And they've been playing him at nose tackle, which I don't super understand, but sure. He's such a liability against the run that they just were effectively like, we're only going to see you on third downs, guy. Thank you for your service. We're paying you $20 million to be here on third down. That's kind of what happened. But the fact that Redmond has emerged has been really important to solving that problem.
What is Flores? I mean, do you see changes year to year from Flores? Is there basically, he's running the same, wants to confuse the quarterback, confuse the offensive line, and then, he'll either send or back out. I mean, do you notice any changes year to year, or is it pretty much, similar to what you've seen in the past?
I think philosophically, it's very similar from year to year, right? Philosophically, we see a high rate of pressure. We see a zone capping that pressure. We see players playing off coverage, right? And we see pressure come from a bunch of different angles, whether it is up the A gap or the D gap, or you've got a lot of stunts in one game and then you don't have that many twists in another game. So that does look similar, but the way that they're accomplishing a lot of these has been different year to year. So one year, for example, I think 2023, they ran a lot of cover 2 at the back end, right? Then last year was a lot of cover 4. This year it's a lot of cover 6. And what they do is they do a really good job of figuring out when they want to rotate in disguise and when they don't. So for example, if you look at the pre-snap rotation versus post-snap rotation, the Vikings, I believe, led the league last year in how often they would switch what the look is between looking at 2 high and seeing 1 high or vice versa. And this year, they know that they have a reputation for it. So they're actually doing it less and still confusing quarterbacks just as often because they're expecting a change and they don't see it, which is just as much of like a magic trick as before. And so the way it carries out, the details are different in a lot of ways. You know, which gaps you want your players to attack, how far you're going to loop. The relative athleticism of your players is going to determine whether or not you can skip 2 gaps or have a 3-person stunt. Like with Harrison Phillips on the field, they couldn't do 3-person stunts, right? I mean, he's a great player, but you're not getting him to move laterally across, gaps along with everybody else, right? Well, he's not there. So you got Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, you got Jalen Redmond. They could do all of that, right? And so you're seeing a lot more of that. Dallas Turner is not Andrew Van Ginkel. And so they're not having him play a lot of spot drop zones. When they drop him off into coverage, he's playing in the flat. So it's very similar in terms of how you would describe it at a high level. But I think the details have been changing a lot from year to year. And I think that that's really cool because he's retaining his core and what he's good at, but making it pretty difficult for other teams to kind of get a good read on how exactly to attack.
That's exactly what you want, right?
Yeah.
Well played. So both of the Vikings tackles practice today. Do you think that they both play on Sunday? It's been a while since you've had your starting quarterback and both tackles all in the lineup at the same time.
It's such a mystery, right? Because on a short week, right, Christian Darrisaw played a full game against the Eagles, and then on Thursday, and the Vikings actually didn't practice. Like, they only had walkthroughs between Sunday and Thursday against the game against the Chargers, right? And so they were going to decide immediately before the game whether Christian Darrisaw was going to play. And based off of their pregame warmups, they decided he'd be able to play. So he plays, and it's just not working. He plays 9 snaps, and he's done. And, the Vikings media were like, what is going on here? I thought, he was on a pitch count. He played the full game against the Steelers, then only played 40 snaps against the Browns. So clearly over those 2 weeks, you only wanted him to play like 100-odd snaps. Is he on a pitch count anymore? Because he played the full game against Philadelphia, and you knew you had the short week. And it sounded like the way the Vikings made it sound is that they were kind of in a spot where they didn't know. Right, they didn't know where he was going to be from week to week, which is really alarming, right? Because he has a PCL injury, but there's we have a reasonably good understanding of how long each of these injuries and he had multiple ligament tears, but how long each of these injuries take to recover from. And obviously players will occupy different parts of that spectrum, but for the most part, you kind of know what it looks like when it's recovered. And for them to be kind of confused or seeing setbacks or seeing changes in his mobility, his pain tolerance or pain levels, I think it's really destabilizing for them. So I think they kind of don't know either. And I think they've kind of communicated some uncertainty about his week-to-week availability, despite the fact that he should be fully healthy. So I don't know if Christian Darrisaw is going to play. Having 10 days of rest, obviously, is probably going to help a lot, but that's a good question. I think Brandon Neal is likely to play. He didn't play against the Chargers, but I think had it been a full week, there was a pretty good chance he would have played. And I think that now with additional time, 2 weeks essentially of rest, that he's probably going to play.
All right. Before we take out of here, any predictions you have on the game? Doesn't have to be like the score or anything like that, but anything that you're expecting to happen in this game.
Man, I think I'll cheat a little bit. I was asked this on another podcast, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to say a defensive score in this game. I think JJ McCarthy holds onto the ball really long, and unless that's changed in the past 5 weeks, I think that creates a lot of opportunities for especially Aiden Hutchinson, but like Ali McNeil or even like DJ Reader once he gets in the backfield on occasion, right? Anybody who can get in the backfield will have that opportunity because he's holding onto the ball. That create strip sack opportunities, interception opportunities, and I think that'll. And also, there's a new center, right? Like Blake Brandel, this is his 3rd game ever, college, NFL, high school, whatever, playing center. There's snap exchange problems with him. And so that'll create some opportunities for fumbles too. But also the Vikings defense, which is not very good at takeaways this year, has created some takeaway opportunities that they just haven't capitalized on. And I think that when you've got somebody like an Isaiah Rodgers, when Andrew Van Ginkel is returning, when you've got, the ability to kind of create pressure, and they're creating pressure better than they did last year, then I think that you do have the ability to defensively create some problems. So there's just a lot of opportunity here for a defensive score of some type, even if it's like a safety and McCarthy's holding onto the ball too long in the end zone and then intentional grounding or whatever. I just think that there's something here. It just feels right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope it's the Lions defense that scores, not
Right.
not the Vikings defense. But real quick, I guess I was wondering your opinion on the Hutch extension that happened today. Like, do you have any thoughts about it? Is
Yeah, well, I
someone that
mean, I
now could?
think I think the total came in just a little bit under Micah Parsons's, right, or like the average. I don't know what the guarantee structure looks like. It looks like it hasn't been released yet, so maybe I shouldn't. But like, I think that I don't know. It makes sense. He's a top 5 edge rusher. Last year was just the most insane, outstanding year I've seen from an edge rusher in a while, and he would have like if he'd finished the year would have gotten Defensive Player of the Year. Not going to happen this year with the way Myles Garrett is playing, but like he's playing outstandingly. Like was. I asked a couple of Lions guys, and they were like, "Yeah, we think he's the 3rd best edge rusher in the NFL, and probably between 3rd and 5th, he's somewhere in that group, right? Like especially with T.J. Watt falling off the way he did. It's like Max Crosby, Micah Parsons, and Myles Garrett, and he's just up in there, and that is the correct amount of money to pay that guy.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't think anyone got screwed. I don't think he got screwed. I don't think the Lions got screwed. Maybe the structure, will hurt somebody at the back end, but as far as we know, in terms of what the deal of the contract is, like it's been some time coming. It sounded like he was telling some insiders a couple months ago that they were going to do that this year, but he wanted to be the one who announced it. And so it sounds like it was a very amicable negotiation, and they were pretty much all on the same page, kind of despite that injury histories. Good deal, not a ton to add to it. I think everyone's going to be happy with it, and he is playing at a level appropriate to that extension.
Yeah. Micah Parsons and Aiden Hutchinson in the same
Good
division.
Lord.
Just I know.
Yeah. With an injured left tackle and an injured right tackle.
I was like that. With not a time you want all your tackles to be injured. No, not good. All right, Arif, why don't you tell our listeners, any line, if you got any line centric podcasts or anything that you're writing, that you're doing, getting ready for this game, where they could find that. And
yeah, so I've got a piece on like what we can tell about how good JJ McCarthy is, which is obviously relevant to not just Michigan fans, right? Which there's maybe some overlap, but also like, this upcoming game and what it's going to look like over the next 5 games for McCarthy. So that's probably the closest thing I have to a Lions Center thing. But, I've got a writer at Wide Left Football who's going to write up a Jalen Redmond piece. And so, Dan Campbell shouting him out, I think that seems kind of cool. I think that having an unknown player that you might want to take into account, especially with the Lions interior being as new as it is relative to the past couple of years, I think that's going to be relevant. Yeah, and then the other piece that I have up that I think might be relevant to all NFL fans is I've got a piece about the dynamic kickoff up on the website and what makes it kind of cool, interesting, and unique in ways that I haven't seen angles, because there's like discussion about how it affects 4th down strategy, how it affects roster building strategy, and the schemes that different special teams coordinators are using to maximize it. So I think that could be kind of like in any NFL fan, could probably find some value in it over at Wide Left Football.
Yeah. My son and I were just discussing, like, he asked me, we were watching college football, the old traditional kickoff, but it's boring because never gets returned. Now the NFL, especially with the new touchback rules and such like that, it's actually a viable play. So yes, that sounds like a great article. Also, moving the touchback up to 35 impacts end of the game management, right? Because you're so close to field goal range, like that.
Yeah. And so like if you're the team that is like, 3 points down and you have the ball on your opponent's 5-yard line and you don't convert 3rd down, right? It's like 4th and 2 from the goal line or whatever. You have to make a determination about whether or not kicking in the field goal, to go up and allow them to have a response field goal, or even to tie the game and have them a response field goal, or to go for it and try to extend the clock, is impacted by the fact that the average field positions around the 30, 35-yard line, the touchback's at the 35 unless you kick it really well. It changes the way that you think about game management in a way that you just have never had to do with a kickoff before, which I think is so fascinating.
Yeah, well, there was the Minnesota game, right? The Minnesota-Chicago game where that was was that week 1?
Yeah,
Ben Johnson kicks it in the end zone, and you guys run it out and waste time. So like that
exactly.
goes into it. Like he could have kicked it out of bounds, or he could have just, did whatever, but Ben Johnson made the wrong call on that, and the Vikings, obviously were coached well. I don't know who returned it for you, but looked right at KOC, and it's like KOC's like, run that out.
It was like telling him to go.
Yeah,
I think it was Miles Price, but like the announcers were saying like it would have been better to take the penalty and kick it out of bounds and have it at the 40 than it would have been to let him waste the clock, which is just such an interesting consideration.
Right, exactly. So it's added a lot of dynamics, like stuff that I don't think I really took into consideration, with the more returns, but it does make that play a lot more. Like, it's not a bathroom play now, right? You got to actually pay attention.
Exactly.
But all right, Arif, we appreciate the time. Go check out that article. I know I will, because I'm very interested in that topic. There's a lot of strategy that goes into that. So that's awesome. But we'll see you later on in the season. That's Christmas week though, so that might be really tough.
It might be
we'll
tough,
see how,
yeah.
but we'll see how it goes. I hope you guys don't have too good of a season over there, but I hope that you have you make it enjoyable for your readers.
For sure. I'll do my best, and thank you for having me on, man.
All right. Yep. All right, Jacob, it's time to get into our keys to victory. How are we going to beat these Vikings? What's your first key to victory?
I just have one key to victory, actually. And it's kind of a longer one, but there's just one key to victory for me here.
All right.
I just put play our game. I think our team at our best beats this team at their best 9 times out of 10. So you play our game and don't let this be the one time that we get caught slipping or making mistakes. We're coming off a bye week against a team we're very familiar with. They have the same offensive, defensive coordinators. They've got some new personnel. They're struggling right now. It's not that they're a bad team. You're not going to count them out, but we know what to expect out of them, and they know what to expect out of us. Dan Campbell's 6-2 against Minnesota in his Lions coaching career. Last time we played them at home, there were no higher stakes the last time we played them. It doesn't get any more because that was for, the 1 seed. That was for the division. Everything was on the line that last game, and we beat them 31-9. And especially, we've already just talked about the numbers, but if we play our game and we use our rushing attack to control the time possession and control the movement of the ball and just wear them down, it's going to happen more times than not. If we stick to the run game, it's going to happen. So I just think if we play our game and do our thing, that, we're going to come out on top.
Yeah, I like it. I think the rushing, when we talked about the rushing statistics earlier, just plays right into it, right? Stop their run, be able to run the ball. The Lions should be fine. I have a few keys to victory. My first one is to get into manageable third downs. You don't want to be in 3rd and long with this defense. You don't know what Brian Flores is going to do. You don't want to have, like you said, we want to avoid mistakes. We don't want to give them any extra opportunities. So get in manageable 3rd downs where we could either rush or pass, because I could see us rushing even on 3rd and 4. With as bad as this rush defense is, we'll just, try to control the offensive line and just take it on it. And also, we just need to increase our confidence on these 3rd downs. We need to get better 3rd down possessions. If you listen to any of the press conferences, that's what all the coaches are talking about. That's what they studied over the bye week. And when we talk about J-Mo not getting as many touches, maybe Laporta not getting as much as we want, if we extend these drives, that's 3 or 4 more passes that we could give to these guys. That's more runs that we could give to Dan Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs. It just gives opportunities to everybody else, and then we could score, especially over a turnover. We're going 3 and out, or barely getting 1 first down and then having to either field goal or punt. So we need to extend these drives. We need to get better on 3rd down. We need to get pressure on McCarthy. If we get pressure on McCarthy, he's going to make a mistake. It's just going to happen. And we'll see if their tackles are fully healthy. Minnesota's tackles are fully healthy, but their interior is not that great. And Aleem McNeil, expect some pressure up the middle from Aleem McNeil.
Yeah. Young quarterback on the road in Detroit. I mean, coming off of the injury and everything, the stakes are high for him. You want the pressure to get to him for sure.
Yes, it's going to be loud in there. The offensive line, especially, they haven't played well together. You're expecting some false starts, right? This communication's going to be off. Just the crowd needs to play into it. Make McCarthy make a mistake. I know that McCarthy, he's used to big crowds. National championship game, he's used to that stuff. But the NFL is a totally different thing, and Ford Field is a weapon for the Lions. I have one more key to victory. And this is, I know Terrion is practicing full. I don't care. Put a Meek on JJ and you just let him travel.
You want it to look like it did last matchup.
That's exactly right. whatever it has to do with Rockison and Terrion, or trading snaps or whatever, they're going to ease Terrion in if he even plays. Let them figure out Jordan Addison and just let Amik just travel wherever JJ goes. I know Amik will want that, and that's going to be the most effective thing.
Yeah, Amik does not shy away from the competition, and he showed up in the best way possible in the last matchup. Held JJ to, I think, like 3 catches on like 7 targets or something like that. So yes, absolutely. If we can have another game like that, we're going to be all right.
Yes, exactly. And, just get some pressure on him. Maybe Amik will get a tip pass, get something going on that way. Maybe Brian Branch will, make us, feel his presence again. All right, Jacob. Roar alert. Who is the player that's going to make some noise for the Lions in this game?
All right. My roar alert this week, Brian Branch. Branch had to sit out last week, or we had the bye week, but he had to sit out because of the suspension. Branch always plays with that intensity anyway. This is his comeback game. This is at home. It's a divisional matchup. I just expect a big play or two from Brian Branch here.
Love to see it. I kind of expect that too. I'm going with Aleem McNeil. As I just mentioned, keys to victory. I expect some pressure out the middle. He played his first game. He's gotten the taste back. Going against some inexperience in the middle center that is playing his 3rd game ever. This is the game that Aleem McNeil shines, especially if they're gonna put all that attention on Hutch and his new extension. I'm going with Aleem to have just a breakout game in this one. Even if he doesn't get his first sack, I'm expecting pressure and just wreaking havoc all day.
All right, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be fun to watch. Great guarantee time. I'll go first on this one. The Lions are going to win the turnover battle in this one. That's my guarantee.
All right. I think I said that one time, and there was no turnovers in the game.
There was no turnovers, yeah. But you're a jinx, man.
Right. And that's why, I got to pick my guarantees that maybe don't matter as much if I jinx them. So my grit guarantee this week, I'm going with the stats, so I'll probably be wrong here, but I'm going to say that we hold them to less than 100 yards rushing. So we've only allowed 2 teams to hit 100 yards, and one of those teams was the Bears, and the Bears ran the ball the entire last drive because they were down by 31.
Mm-hmm.
And also the Vikings have only hit 100 yards 2 times, and one of those was against the Bengals. So, if they have both their starting tackles back, obviously maybe things will be clicking a little bit more if they're trying to take some of the heat off of JJ, but our run defense is pretty good. So I think the only way they hit 100 yards is either JJ McCarthy scrambling or if they have to run the ball 30 times. Yep. So I feel pretty safe saying we'll hold them less to 100 yards rushing. So anyone betting, bet the over, because
that might be that'd be nice. I'd love to see it, and then the Lions are going to rush for well over 100 yards in this game, so it'll be good. We'll see what the time possession looks like, but I think it's going to be heavily in favor of the Lions at the end of this one, and the score will be. I know you don't pick scores, but I'm going to say the score is going to be heavily in our favor too. Get that Ford Field welcome. I won't be at the game. I got to work this weekend. I actually sold my tickets this weekend. Hopefully some Lions fans got them. We'll see. Maybe I'll talk to the season ticket holders that sit behind me and make sure I didn't sell it to anybody in purple.
Mm-mm.
It is one of those things, but gotta subsidize. I gotta afford to pay for these tickets somehow. They're not getting any cheaper, Jacob.
No, they are not.
No, they're not. All right. Feels weird to end here after the great guarantee, but like I said, check us out on the other. It's on the same feed. It's not a different feed. It's just a separate podcast that we're releasing. So
it's the same podcast. It's a separate episode.
Yeah, just separate episode. Right.
Yeah.
That's a better way of saying it. Thanks. Thanks for saving me there, Jacob.
As always, usually.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We are going to be on another podcast too called Let's Skull. We're actually getting ready to record with them shortly. So you could check us out over there if you want some additional Vikings perspective. And then also check out Arif stuff. He is such a good writer and just such a good person. Just always fun to talk to. So check out some Arif stuff. And Jacob, anything else?
I'm ready. Ready for Sunday,
all right, man. That's right. Let's go get football back in Detroit. Love it. All right. Go Lions.